Okay, I guess we're gonna have to get started. So yesterday we were looking at the writing section. We started looking at the writing section, and we went specifically over task number 1 of the writing section, which is the iterated question. So in this question, we said first you have to read an article, then listen to a lecture, and finally write your essay. You get 20 minutes to write. And we started doing this example. So just to review a little bit, do you remember what it was about?
Literature.
Exactly. So the fact that people are reading less literature, right? And we said that this was an argumentative type of text because the writer is trying to convince us of something. So what's the writer's opinion in this article? You guys remember? Basically, the writer here was saying that this.
Can you repeat again, please?
Yes, we said that in an argumentative text, in the introduction, the first paragraph, you will have the writer's main opinion. And then you will have reasons supporting that opinion. So what was that opinion in this text?
It's has an unfortunate effect with the adjective.
Exactly. Perfect, that's what we said. So that is what the author thinks. The author thinks that the fact that people are reading less literature is unfortunate, or it has unfortunate effects. And they give us 3 reasons. What was the first reason?
It's free in public. The intellectual simulation that literature does.
Exactly. So according to the writer, nothing else is going to give us that intellectual stimulation. The second reason was?
The lower the level of the culture in general.
Exactly. So this has lowered the level of culture. And finally, the last reason was?
Training slides to climb because per standards. It's there are talented writers today, but they lack an audience.
Right. Yes, that's a reason. So many talented writers, there are many talented writers today, but they lack an audience, right? So they probably won't write as much in the future. Okay. So that was the text, right? And then we listened to the lecture. Would you guys like to hear it again, or do you remember what the professor's points were?
I have notes.
You have your notes? Okay, you both have your notes?
Yes.
Okay, then that's perfect. Then we're gonna work with that. So we were saying that today we're gonna start writing the essay, and you're gonna see it won't take us more than 15 minutes. It shouldn't take us more than that. So in your essay, you have to have, we said, 4 paragraphs. Now, one way to remember this is the structure of your essay, of what you write, will be exactly the same as the structure of the article that you read. And you have the article on your screen. So it's easy to remember that you have to have 4 paragraphs because in the article you will see those 4 paragraphs. So you have to have 4 paragraphs, you need to have an introduction, and you need to have the body of your essay. And the conclusion is completely optional, only when you're done with everything else. Now, in the introduction, of course, there are many things you can do. And I don't know if it was your group, I think it was the next group. But I was saying yesterday, one mistake that students make a lot is thinking that that they have to write a creative essay. So sometimes it's like they want to have like a great, interesting introduction that has a hook and catches the reader's attention, that is creative, that is different from the rest of essays. that is not really the goal here. It's okay if your essay is boring. That's totally fine. The goal here is just to demonstrate that you know how to write in an academic context, that you can come up with good sentences, that you remember or can understand the content that was given to you, that you show good grammar and good vocabulary. Nothing in the criteria that they used to evaluate your response, which we saw, right? It was this one. Nothing says something like creativity, right? It doesn't have to be different. That doesn't have to be different than the rest. So you're just going to have the basic elements. Now, in your introduction, you basically need 3 things. The first one is the article's main point, okay, which is basically the opinion, the writer's opinion. Second thing you need in the introduction is, of course, the professor's main point. In this case, since it's an argumentative text, in an argumentative lecture, you need the professor's opinion. And finally, you need some transitional phrases. Okay, that is everything you need in the introduction. You need to state the main point in the reading, the main point in the listening, and just to have some transitional phrases, which is also optional, but it makes it better. Okay? One thing that you don't have to have, and I really recommend you don't do in the introduction, is please don't summarize the entire body. So in your introduction, you shouldn't be talking about anything that was mentioned in the body of the article and in the body of the lecture. So you should say nothing about intellectual stimulation or culture or writers. You only have to focus on the main points, which is always in the introduction, okay? So please don't summarize. Some students try to summarize and be like, so the writer gives these 3 points and the professor gives these other 3 points. You can do that, but it's gonna take you more time that you don't really, that you need for other more important parts. The intro is not that relevant. And another thing, you have the risk of sounding repetitive and repeating words, right? Because if you're already gonna say intellectual stimulation in the introduction, then you're kind of gonna be forced to repeat the same thing in the first paragraph. So you're gonna repeat words, you're gonna sound redundant, and you're gonna waste time. So please don't summarize the reasons or the body in the introduction, okay? This is everything you need to have in your intro. Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions about that? Okay, now we're gonna start directly. This is our template. It says, the reading extract claims. Now this word basically means says, right? The reading extract says, the reading extract, by the way, is just the reading, the text. So the reading extract claims, and here you need to have the main opinion of the writer. So we're gonna write it down. What can you guys say? Of course, you can go back and see what we have, and you can copy and paste, right? Technically, you could do that because you have this. So you could say, the reading extract claims that people are reading far less literature, and this trend has unfortunate effects for blah, blah, blah. But don't do that, because remember, vocabulary is part of the rubric as well. They will notice if you copy and paste. What you need to do is paraphrase this. So look for synonyms, right? Instead of saying unfortunate, you can say troubling effects. Instead of saying effects, you can say impact, right? Instead of saying it has unfortunate effects, you could say it has a negative impact, right? Something like that. You need to paraphrase, you need to look for synonyms. I'm not telling you to paraphrase every single word, but you shouldn't copy and paste. It cannot be the same, okay? So what can we say? How can we paraphrase the writer's opinion? That this trend, that people are reading less literature, has unfortunate effects. How can we say that in different words? What do you guys think? Any ideas? The reading extract claims or says, what are we gonna say? Come on, guys. Just do whatever. If you have an idea, even if it's not great, say it.
Maybe something. Sorry.
No, no, it's okay. Cool.
Okay, thank you. And maybe people read less than before.
Okay.
And that could make I don't know what else.
Okay, maybe Jose? Can you help us out? And that could let's
Like a negative impacts.
okay, that could have a negative impact.
Like synonym of unfortunate.
Yes. All right, and that could have
Could be.
negative. All right, great. So we have the reading extra claims. That is part of the template, right? We didn't write that, but we completed it. It says, well, it claims that people read less literature. I think it'd be better to say less literature, right? Because this is specifically about literature. I think that they say that they have started to read like self-help books or other things. So we're just focusing on literature. So just saw that. And that could have a negative impact and provides 3 arguments of support. Now, this is part of the template as well. Basically, this means y nos da 3 razones, right? That's it. Or 3 arguments of support. 3 razones para apoyar. Okay? That is the transitional phrase that I was referring to before. As you can see, I'm not summarizing the reasons. I'm not saying it has a negative impact because we are not being intellectually stimulated, because culture is being lowered, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not summarizing it, right? I'm just mentioning that they give 3 arguments of support, okay? And that is it. That is the article's main point, right? Our first sentence. Is it okay so far? Any questions about that one? All right. Now we move on to the professor's main point. Right? In this case, since it's an argumentative essay or an argumentative lecture, then it's his opinion. Okay, so we say, however, which means but the professor argues that, so the professor actually thinks that, and here we're gonna write down, sorry, Jose? We're gonna write down the professor's opinion, okay? So the professor argues that. Now, what was the professor's opinion? What can we say? Now, in this case, you're gonna write it on your own words. You know, you don't have to worry about paraphrasing. So what did the professor say? Come on, guys. Do you remember? We said that if you have opinions, then the professor's opinion will be the opposite of the writer's opinion, right? So if in this case, the writer says that it'll have a negative impact, what does the professor say about that?
The decrease in people reading doesn't have such a negative impact.
Okay, great. The decrease in people reading does not have such a negative impact. Okay, great. Perfect. So I like one tip as we go, try not to use contractions when you're writing. Okay, so instead of saying doesn't, does not, the full thing. Okay, perfect. And there we have objecting each of the author's arguments. Now this is again part of the template. You don't have to do anything there. And this is just acknowledging that the professor also provides some points, right? The professor doesn't just say something without giving reasons. So that is what that phrase does. That is a transitional phrase. Okay? This will be the blue part. Is this okay so far? Do you have any questions until now? Is it? Any questions? Okay. I'm gonna copy and paste this here. All right. Now, that was the introduction. Now you're gonna continue and you're gonna write down the body of your essay. And after you're done with everything else, after you have finished the entire essay and you think that everything is great and you like your essay and you have corrected grammar, you have checked the spelling, you have maybe improved the words that you used, you've done all of the changes that you wanted to do and you still have extra time, if that is the case, then you can go back to the introduction and add one more sentence, okay? So after you're done writing the entire essay and after you've checked it, you can go back to the introduction and add one more sentence. I don't know why I can't type. Now that sentence is gonna go in the beginning of the introduction, okay? What do you think that sentence will be about? What would you add to that introduction? What do you think it's missing? Okay. All right. So what you can add, I was telling you, as number one sentence will be, or let's say as this number 0, let's say, because it's an extra, is a little bit of context, okay? Maybe you feel that in the introduction, we're being too direct, right? We're starting right off with the reading, but what reading, right? So you should have some context. If you have extra time, you can add this. Now, this sentence that gives context is basically just gonna talk about the topic in general. So that means the topic that was mentioned both in the reading and in the listening, without anybody's opinion, okay? So just the topic in general. And the way that you can do that is the reading, or let's say the article and lecture, both talk about, okay? Or both discuss, could be another thing. And here, you're gonna talk about the topic, all right? Just the topic. So what was the topic in this article and in the lecture? What was the topic? What was this about? Without mentioning the opinions, right?
How much people read literature?
Exactly. So this, both the reading and the listening, both of them were about the fact that people are reading less literature, because that is a fact, right? It isn't an opinion, we said. An opinion is like, well, I think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. That is an opinion. But it is a fact, it is a study that has revealed that people are reading less literature. And that was the topic in common, right? Both of them talk about that. One says that it's a bad thing, and the other one says it's not such a bad thing after all. So that was the topic. And that's what you have to do in the first sentence or in the 0 sentence, right? Like in the extra one. So you're gonna say the article and lecture both talk about, what would you guys say? Remember, we can copy and paste, we said, right? You can just say, they both talk about a recent study that reveals that people, especially young people, are reading languages literature. But do we want to copy and paste? Is that convenient for us? No, right? So we're not gonna copy and paste. We're gonna paraphrase. So how can you guys paraphrase this first sentence, the topic? What can we say? The article and lecture both talk about. What are we gonna say here? Sergio, what do you think we could say?
How many people read literature, maybe?
Okay, yes. The article and lecture both talk about how many people are reading literature. Okay, maybe we can say these days, right? How many people are reading literature these days? Great, so that was the topic, right? The reading extra claims that people read less literature, and that could have a negative impact, and provides three arguments of support. However, the professor argues that, and here we're missing, I think it didn't say, we said the professor argues that, what did we say exactly? Do you guys remember? I think we said something like this trend won't have or does not have, right? We said such a negative impact. I think that's what we said, right? It was something like that. So that is it. Now, as you can see, our introduction is a little bit more complete, right? It even has more sentences, it's a little bit longer, and it makes more sense when we read, right? But remember, this first sentence, the one that is in violet, is completely optional, right? You have to add it after you're done writing the entire essay. Because if you think about it, if I delete this sentence, it still makes sense, right? It's still a great introduction. This is just like an addition, all right? Is that okay? Do you have any questions now so far about the introduction? Any questions? Is it really clear? This was. All right, guys. Then we're gonna make this very small. Okay. Now we're gonna move on to the body of the essay. Now, what do you have to do? What do you have to have in your body? So in each body paragraph, you basically need this. In the first sentence, you need to talk about only the reading. So the first sentence needs to have reason number one from the reading, all right, or from the article. That is gonna be the first sentence, only one sentence, okay? Now the second sentence needs to be reason number one from the lecture. So you need to contrast the reason that was given in the reading with the one that was given in the lecture. And then you have to explain the reason that was given in the lecture a little bit more. So the third sentence is going to be explaining reason one from the lecture. Okay? Now those are the three sentences that you need. All right? These 3 sentences should be at least 4 lines long. Okay, it should be at least 4 lines long. So when I say lines, I mean when you're typing, the way that I have here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. That's what I mean with lines. And I'm speaking when you take the test because it has like the regular font and everything else. Okay, guys? So it should be 4 lines long. Now, if it isn't 4 lines long, then you could add 1 more sentence, but I don't recommend that. I really think that you should try to make 4 lines long only with 3 sentences. Why? Because that way you will be forced to have at least 1 long sentence. And if you have 1 long sentence, you're probably using a compound sentence, all right? And that means not a simple sentence, but a more complex one with a connector in there. So that's why I'm telling you, try to have 3 sentences that are 4 lines long, at least 4 lines long, okay? Could be more. Is that okay? Do you understand what I mean with that? Yes? Any questions so far? All right, so let's do that. We have our first sentence, right? The article starts by stating that. So that is part of the template. Now we have to have reason number 1 from the reading we said, right? So we go back to the reading and we can technically copy and paste. We can say, the article starts by stating that nothing else provides the intellectual stimulation that literature does. But we don't want to copy and paste. So you guys need to find a way to paraphrase this sentence. So how can we say this in different words? I mean, it will be this sentence, right? Everything. So the article starts with stating that this is so unfortunate because nothing else provides intellectual stimulation that literature does. How can we say that in different words? Any ideas? Maybe, Evie, what would you say? What would you write?
It could be the best is unfortunately, I don't know, maybe that the best way to practice to, I don't know a synonym of provides, but to practice your lecture is reading literature, something like that. I'm not sure.
Okay, to practice your lecture, you sure?
You're reading?
Remember, you're reading, okay, that is better. But is it really about practicing reading, about reading comprehension, for example? Isn't it about something else? You know, when I tell you to paraphrase, of course you have to paraphrase, but mostly not the keywords, right? In this case, I don't think that you can have a paraphrase of intellectual stimulation. I mean, you can arrange it differently, right? You can say, if we don't read, we're not being intellectually stimulated. Or the best way to stimulate your intellect is by reading literature, right? You can arrange it differently, but honestly speaking, I don't think you're going to be able to paraphrase these keywords because those are really important words. You know, those are the keywords. You can paraphrase everything else, but you're sort of going to have to mention this. Okay? So how can we do that, Evie? Are you sure the best way to practice reading?
Could be the best way to provide your intellectual, who it would be the best way to provide your the best way to provide intellectual similar. Sorry, teacher. I'm not from the beginning to the class. I entered later, so I'm kind of confused a little, but sorry.
Okay. But we're doing what we did yesterday, right? We weren't doing anything really. We just reviewed what this was about, right? Yesterday we read this and we said that it was an argumentative text. We said that we had a main point, a main opinion, and 3 reasons, right? Now, maybe what we can say is something like, I like the way you were starting. So the best way maybe to stimulate, right? Although I don't know if the article says that that is the best way. I think the problem is that the article says that that is the only way, right? That nothing else will give us this intellectual stimulation. So let's say the article starts by stating that the only way to stimulate your intellect or one's intellect is, what can we say?
Reading literature.
Exactly. Is by reading literature. Great. That is it. Do you see? We already have that one sentence, right? That is our first sentence, sentence number 1. So that is enough. We don't need anything else from the reading. You shouldn't mention anything else. You're just going to waste your time if you include something else. So I know that here we have a lot more of other details, right? We have things like this and understanding of language, empathizing with others, exercising our imaginations. But you gotta identify the main point, which in this case was intellectual stimulation. So we're just gonna do that. We have one sentence starting with capital letters, finishing with a period. That's enough. And it's a simple sentence, by the way. That's enough. Now, we have to move on to sentence number 2. I'm gonna paint it in yellow. So in sentence number 2, we're saying we have to include reason number 1 from the lecture. So from the professor's point of view. And we're gonna say this. Nevertheless, in the presentation, it is noted that. So what was said in the presentation? What was reason number 1 from the lecture? Look at your notes from yesterday. What did the professor say about this? Maybe.
You can increase, well, you can stimulate your intelligence with another kind of reading.
Okay, with other types of reading, right?
Yes.
Exactly. You know the difference between another and other. You use another when you talk about singular things. So another book, another reason, another person. And you use other when you speak in plural. So other books, other types, other things. Okay. So with other types of reading, was it only reading? Right? Yeah, it was reading. Yeah, it was just reading. Yeah. I'm getting confused with the second. Okay, now that is one sentence. That is a great sentence. We could make it a compound sentence, but we're gonna leave it there now. We're gonna leave it there for a while. We need one more sentence, right? We have sentence number 3. Sentence number 3 is supposed to be an explanation of reason number 1 from the lecture. So we have to explain this a little bit more. You need to ask yourself those questions, right? Those open questions like, how? How can we stimulate our intellect with other types of reading? Or why? Why can we stimulate our intellect with other types of reading? Or when, right? When can we stimulate our intellect with other types of readings? Or, I don't know, where, right? Where can we stimulate our intellect with other types of reading? So you have to ask yourself those questions. And that way you're gonna come up with that explanation. All right, so how, where, when, why, okay? So what are we gonna say? What is that sentence gonna be? How can we explain this a little bit more? Look at your notes. Does the professor give examples? Does the professor give reasons? Does the professor mention studies that have been done? What does the professor say exactly? What can we say? This one sentence.
It could be something like in schools and university, you must read books of history, math, geography, and all of these help you to stimulate your intellect.
Okay, great. You must read. Sorry, come again.
I'm gonna read again. Books, you must read books of history, math, geography, and geography.
Geography book. Okay. All right.
All of these help us to stimulate your intellect.
Okay, to stimulate our intellect, right? If we're talking about ourselves. Great. Maybe we can say all of which. All of which help us to stimulate our intellect. Great. I really love it. Now, remember what we said, right? We have to meet 4 lines long. So we have to do something. What do we do to make it 4 lines long? Because right now it doesn't look like a paragraph, or does it look like a paragraph? Not too much, right? I think we need one more thing. Even if it's like this, we need to, let's not add one more sentence. We're not gonna add another sentence, but tell me guys, how do you think we can make it a little bit long? Okay, I'm gonna give you some tips. First one is, when you're joining these 2 sentences, I want you guys to always 100% of the time use a transition word or a linking word. All right. I didn't include one here as a part of the template because it can be different. If you guys are going to introduce an example, then you have to use a transition word to introduce an example, right? Like, for instance, for example, to illustrate. If you're going to use a fact, then you can say, in fact, as a matter of fact, actually, I don't know. If you're going to, I don't know. In this case, you won't, right? But if you would be like adding an opposing view, then you would say, nevertheless, nonetheless. So depending on what you're going to do, if you're going to introduce a result, then you're going to say as a result, thus, therefore. So in this case, what linking word can we use in here? One that almost always works is in fact, right? That's one that like you should know. In fact, it's like de hecho in schools and universities. You must read history, math, and geography books, all of which help us to stimulate our intellect, okay? So this is gonna help you with that criteria that says that you should be connecting your ideas well, right? So this makes it a little bit more connected. It makes it longer as well. Now, this is a compound sentence already. Do you see this semicolon that I'm using here? I'm using that semicolon because I'm connecting 2 different ideas, right? If you look at this, both of them have their own verb. This verb is help, this verb is must. So all of them, I mean, both of them have their own idea. So that's why I'm using a semicolon. It's already a compound sentence. We're gonna try to make this sentence long. All right, so how can we do that? Or what would you guys do? Or would you add another sentence? What do you think we can do? Because it has to be a little bit longer. It has to be at least 4 lines long. So any suggestions?
Maybe we can change stimulate with you can work out on your intellect.
Okay, you can work out with your intellect, you said?
Yes.
Okay. I think you just have to, you would just have to say you can work your intellect. You can work out your intellect. I don't know. What do you guys think? You can exercise your intellect would sound better. Right? You can exercise your intellect. So what do we do?
Maybe we can mention another types of books to make it more longer.
Making it here? Okay, you could, but you have to kind of stick to what the professor said. So if the professor mentioned more, then you can mention more, but don't include any books just because, I mean, just from your knowledge, right? You just have to base your essay on what the professor said. So if the professor mentioned more books, we can do that, and if not, we cannot add more books. What we could do maybe here is say something like, you can exercise your intellect with other types of reading that are just as demanding as literature, right? Maybe that, because the thing is, the thing that we're trying to prove, or that the professor was trying to prove, is that these books are just as complex, just as stimulating, just as demanding, just as high quality as literature, right? So it would be great to mention that. So here we're saying that they stimulate our intellect, so, but maybe here we could say other types of reading that are just as demanding as literature is, right? So we're making that comparison between this type of books and literature, you know? Is that okay? Yes? All right, guys. Do you have any questions about this structure? About what we just did? Any questions so far? Okay, guys. Now, everything else, I mean, the other paragraphs are exactly the same, follow the same structure. So you will still need one sentence for the reason mentioned in the reading. So you will say, furthermore, the author also points out, which means also mentions that, and you will include reason number 2 from the reading, right? And you will say, turning to trivial forms of entertainment has lowered the level of culture in general. But you will paraphrase it, right? You will say it in different words. That will be your sentence from the reading. Then you will move on to the listening and be like, on the other hand, the professor explains, and here you have to contrast it with what the professor says, right? You can, and you say that culture can be expressed in different forms, right? And then you have to explain a little bit more. So you can do so by giving examples, right? You can say, for instance, the professor mentions that a good video, I don't know, a great film or a well-written song contain or express as much, I don't know, contain culture that speaks more directly to the audience or something like that, right? But you can try to give those examples to explain a little bit more. Is that okay? You're basically going to do the same in paragraph 2 and in paragraph 3, in the body paragraph 3, right? You'll do the same here. Is that okay? Any questions about that? No questions before we move on? Okay, guys. Now, first of all, some tips to remember the template, because I know it's a long template. And if you try to memorize it like word by word, I don't think you're gonna get anywhere, right? Then the test day will come and you will be lost. Maybe you, because of the nervousness, you will forget. So my advice is instead of learning the template word by word, just try to remember the structure. You got 4 paragraphs, you say the same, you have reason 1 from the reading and 2 sentences for the lecture. And try to learn these, try to learn some reporting verbs. So make sure that you learn some verbs. For example, the verb claim we are using, right? Which means says. We're using the verb maybe explains, the verb points out. So try to learn some reporting verbs, some verbs that are synonym of the word say. Okay, learn some verbs. Try to remember some ways to refer to the reading. So for example, you know that to the reading you can refer to as article, as author, as writer. Same thing for the listening. Just try to memorize 3 words for each one, and that's enough. And of course, this is the basic part. That's why you take the test on connectors. You have to know some transition words, right? And some connectors and how to use them. So you do that, and believe me, you can create your own template. You know the structure, you can create your template, because it doesn't matter if I change this word, right? Instead of saying stating, I can say mentioning or claiming or arguing. That wouldn't be a problem, okay? So I would recommend you guys do that. Any questions about that? Okay. Yes, tell me, Shadia.
Teacher, well, we can have access to this presentation.
Yes,
Me?
of course.
Thank you.
Now, other things I can tell you, like some general tips. We will have 1 more class to practice this integrated writing. So it's fine. Okay, guys. Now, but some more tips I can give you. First one, as for vocabulary, you know, there's always the question on how can I improve my vocabulary. My advice, don't just like try to improve your vocabulary if you don't have that much time. Then the best or the quickest thing you can do is learn some adjectives. Changing adjectives and adverbs, learning adjectives and adverbs is the easiest, quickest way in which you can improve your vocabulary. Okay, so what are adjectives and adverbs? Adjectives are basically words that are used to describe something, right? To describe something, someone, an idea, anything. So for example, this like negative, positive, right? Those are adjectives. And you will see them a lot in here. Okay, so make sure that you know some adjectives. So instead of saying good and bad, you can use this, right? Positive and negative. Instead of saying important, you can say key, you can say strategic, you can say essential, you can say, I don't know. There are many, right? Many synonyms for those adjectives. So learn some adjectives. That's gonna get you to improve your vocabulary really quickly. Another thing is adverbs. So adding adverbs to your essay will make you sound like fancier, like more academic. For example, here, let's say here, right? Every time that you're contrasting, you say, nevertheless, in the presentation, it is noted that you can exercise your intellect, right? Now, how can you add an adverb? An adverb is a word that modifies a verb. So adverbs are words like, for example, I don't know. Actually, it's an adverb. Certainly, it's an adverb. Definitely, totally, unfortunately. I don't know. By contrast, truly, deeply. Usually those words that end in ly, those are adjectives. Okay? So you could add them to your essay and that will make you sound better. And that's just memorizing a couple of adverbs. So for example, here where I was telling you, you could add an adverb. What adverb do you guys think you can add here? or here.
Definitely.
Yes, you can do that. You can say it is noted that you can totally or you can definitely exercise your intellect with other types of reading, right? I'm adding that adjective, and I'm not only am I like adding one more word that doesn't like change anything, but I'm like reinforcing the idea, right? Adverbs, they function to make things stronger. If you say you can exercise your intellect, that's fine. But if you say you can definitely exercise your intellect, that idea is stronger, right? So adverbs, that's what they do. They make ideas stronger. So try to learn some adverbs and try to implement them in your essays. And that is another way to like do vocabulary, because these are basic adverbs, right? But there are more. There are more complex adverbs that you can use, and you just memorize a couple of them, and you will always have an opportunity to add them. So that would be like my tips for vocabulary. Okay. Now, as for grammar, what I could tell you is always make sure that you use at least one conditional in each essay. Okay. So use a conditional in the essay. For example, here you could do it maybe even here, right? You could say, it is noted that if one wants to exercise their intellect, we can do so with other types of reading as well that are just as demanding as literature is, right? So I force myself to use this conditional. Instead of saying you can exercise your intellect with other types of reading, I said, if you want to exercise your intellect, you can do it with other types of reading, right? So it's the same idea, but I'm including this conditional. Why? What's the difference? This sentence here is a simple sentence, but the conditional would be a compound sentence. And believe me, they measure that, right? They measure how many compound sentences you're using, what structures you're using. You can use, like the one that I just did was the zero conditional, right? It was just the zero conditional. But if you want to make it even better, you can use other conditionals. You can use the first, you can use the second conditional. You could say, if somebody wanted to exercise their intellect, they could do so by reading other types of books, right? Or something like that. So there I'm using the second condition, right? I'm using other tenses as well. So try to force yourself to use at least one conditional in each essay, okay? That is gonna help you a lot with showing grammar. And of course you can use more than one, right? But at least one conditional sentence. Try to use connectors, right? So it's okay if you use words like, let's say, I don't know, and, because, but instead of using because, you can use since, you can use so, right? Or instead of so, you can use therefore. So those connectors are going to help you also create more complex sentences. Okay? Try to use them. So that is what I could tell you to show grammar. Okay, that those are some tips for grammar. And of course, the most important tip for grammar is check your essay. And that I think has to do with timing as well. So what you should do is write your essay, just type, and don't do what we did, which is like correcting here and there, making it better, changing the words, thinking of how we can express the idea better. Don't do that. In the beginning, when you start the 20 minutes, you need to write the essay without even thinking. You just have to go and go until you're done with the essay. That won't take you 20 minutes. It should take you less. If you practice enough, then you should be fast enough to write it in, let's say, 15 minutes. And the other 5 minutes, you're gonna spend checking your grammar and changing words and maybe adding these things, like the first line of our introduction. So those 5 minutes at the end are gonna be for you to check grammar, spelling, format, punctuation, vocabulary, maybe to add that conditional sentence. So you are gonna do those changes at the end, okay? First, the most important thing is that you actually have an essay. Okay, guys? Those are some tips I can give you. Do you have any questions so far? No questions? Here we go. Okay, guys. Then I want to say something. Well, first I'm gonna start the today's survey. Now, while you're at it, I wanted to say I'm gonna send you guys a practice sample, an essay that you have to write. It's here already, but I'll send it to the group chat so that everybody has it, even the ones that haven't joined today. I'm gonna send it to you guys. Please write your essay, and you have to send it to an email that I will give you to in the group chat, okay? You will send your essay to this email, and I will review it and give you guys some feedback. So that would be really cool if you want to improve, if you want to see how you're doing, you know. I'm gonna send the instructions in our group chat, okay? Because we don't have that much time. So check that, write the essay, and send it to the mail. You will have until Monday to write the essay, okay? Well, no, you have, it's the holidays, right? So maybe until Wednesday, all right? So before class, Wednesday morning, you should have already turned your essays in, submitted them, so that I can check them and review them on Wednesday's class. Okay, guys? So I'm gonna like tell you the instructions through the group chat. Any questions before we go there?
Excuse me, teacher, does that mean that we don't have classes on Tuesday?
I think not, right? I think it's a national holiday. Monday and Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. Can anyone confirm?
Yes, it is. It's a holiday.
So we won't be having classes on Tuesday. I will be seeing I'll be seeing you directly on Wednesday, and we'll do this on Wednesday. Okay, so you'll have until Wednesday morning to turn your essays in, because I need to check them before class. If you don't send them by then I won't be able to check them and give you feedback. Okay, guys? Any other question? Okay, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, a great long weekend, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Remember to check the group chat. I'll be sending instructions there.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
Bye, guys. Take